So, Brad Ingelsby, you created and wrote every one of those 7 episodes of Mare of Easttown. First of all, let's just congratulate you on the success of bringing back this weekly viewing pleasure, not binge watching, but this weekly pleasure of watching. And what was it like to see the buzz building week in and week out and the ratings increase?
Yeah, I mean, it was wonderful, Paul. I think I think we were the beneficiary of the weekly drop in this case, and I think that we saw an audience get wrapped up in the mystery and begin to put out their theories. And I think having the weekly drop was so helpful in this type of show where you could spend time with, it's not only the mystery, but you get to know the characters in a deeper way where you're not getting to binge it. And I think it was, it paid dividends in terms of the ratings and just getting people's interest. And like I said, I'm just really grateful HBO has that model, because I think in terms of murder mystery, the whodunit, it really benefits the show that audiences get to experience it week to week, get caught up in the mystery and build the buzz over not just one day, but over several weeks.
And you knew who done it, but we didn't. And so what was it like to see the different theories that people were spitting out, knowing how wrong they were? And so obviously in all cases but one.
Like, I mean, it was I gotta be honest, Paul, it was unnerving, because you were, one of I think the tightrope walk that we had to do in the editing always was that you couldn't hide the killer too much. And so when you got to the ending, you would go, wait, but who is that? So you had to plant enough crumbs along the way where you got to know the person. So when the reveal happened, there was an emotional connection there. So that was really important. And yet, knowing we had to plant those seeds, we were always wondering, have we planted too many seeds? And have we seeded it too much? Is the audience going to be ahead of us? So I have to say, watching the theories I got a lot of enjoyment out of it, but I was also quite scared along the way, because you were always wondering, is the audience ahead of us? Are they ahead of us? Are they going to be ahead of us, so that when the reveal occurs, they're going, well, we knew that 8 episodes or whatever it was. And so I think it was stressful, I would say. Really, it was really stressful more than anything.
Well, you mentioned about catching up, being caught up in the characters' lives. And I think was huge part of the appeal. Was it is this family drama that marries with a murder mystery. But I guess as it unfolds, there's this synchronicity between Mare and Laurie, right? Like, Mare is trying to come to terms with the death of her son, and she does sort of at the end there, just as Laurie loses her son. Just when you were crafting the plot, how easily or difficult did it all come together to put all those pieces of the puzzle together?
Yeah, it's always difficult. I've never written an easy one. They're always hard in their own ways, I suppose. But I think this one, that I think the key in my head was Mare's character is vigilant about never having to confront the loss in her life, Paul. And so, when I was crafting the murder mystery element, I knew that whatever the ultimate reveal was, when all the cards were out on the table, it had to be emotionally, in some way, it had to crush her in a way. It would tear down the walls that she had so adamantly been constructing in her life. And so the reveal had to be surprising, but it also had to be incredibly emotional in that reveal or the sequence of events at the end of the finale have to ultimately lead our main character, Mare, up to the attic, or up to confronting the thing that's been haunting her. And so the question always was, well, what is that reveal going to be emotionally? It has to be incredibly emotional in that it's the reveal of the killer, and that obviously is the payoff of the mystery of the show, but it also has to connect in her life in a way that is also going to play into the themes of her life, which is grief and confronting the loss. And so when I was crafting the story, I knew the reveal had to be a one person that was close to Mare. And it always led back to Laurie, and Laurie had a son. So when the themes were in my head, it felt like I was always going back to Lori. It was always a connection to Lori, the one person that stood by her in the most challenging times of her life. Now Mare would have to do it. There was a mirroring effect there that I was interested in terms of the themes of the show. And, but it was never easy. And it was always a challenge to plot out the reveals along the way. But it was always someone that was going to be close to Mare, because you had to have the emotion be strong enough to get Mare to confront the things that were haunting her in her own life.
So you start with this character, with Mare, sort of seemingly stuck in this small town, in this rut. And just where did she come from for you? I mean, you've got the blank page in front of you. How do you create such a rich character that I believe Kate Winslet said yes after reading just 2 episodes? So she saw the richness of the character that you created.
Yeah, so that was, I think writing the story came from a desire to want to talk about home and where I grew up and how I grew up, and just kind of, the rhythms of life in this specific part of the country, which is where I grew up and was raised, and where my parents were raised in Delaware County. I grew up in Chester County, one county over, but that was an area that my parents had grown up in. That's where my wife was born and raised, Delaware County. So I think initially the instinct was to want to write about home. And then I had a conversation, Paul, with a cop on the East Coast, a friend of mine, and he was telling me about his initial assignment as an officer, and how he was at a station, a really small town. It was him and 11 other officers, and had one detective, a woman, and where they worked used to be a train station that they converted into the police station. So these were just like little nuggets that were interesting to me. And when he said that you had one detective in a small town, I was interested in that, because if there's one woman who's been charged with investigating all of these crimes, she probably knows a lot of people in the community. And then I just started to dig in that way. And I grew up in a basketball clan. My dad was a basketball player. My brother was a basketball player. So I had so that's sports in my veins a little bit. And so, and then it was maybe just a connective, the pieces there, the tissue of like this cop idea, and then obviously my background as a basketball player, and then I began to structure the story around those pieces. But I found in writing, it's always just, it's the aggregate of a number of pieces. You get an idea that, it seems like it's not going to connect with something else, and then you hear another idea, and suddenly those two match up, and then the ball's rolling down the hill a little bit.
And the notion that when we first meet Mare, really everything is going in that first episode, to the, celebrating the Lady Hawks victory from long ago. And we just see her, and she's injured, and when she's been pursuing a criminal, and she's so broken, and that she's being sort of lauded for that one moment. And it's the picture in the paper, and this idea that was the highlight of her life happens when she's only 18.
Yes.
How I'm curious, like, you send the script along, Kate Winslet's reading it, and is that right, that she said yes after only getting 2 scripts?
Yeah, after 2 scripts, she said yes, which is a testament to Kate's conviction, because we've all seen enough of these mysteries, which can start out strong and can go sideways along the way with just some leaps of faith that you're asking an audience to make, or sometimes the plot hole. So a testament to Kate. I think Paul, we caught her at the right time, which is sometimes the way any project gets made. You get a script in the hands of an actor at a certain time in their life. And I think Kate was getting ready to do Ammonite when we sent her the scripts, and I think she was looking to do something completely in the other direction after Ammonite. And this obviously is a small town Pennsylvania cop. It was completely different, and she never held a gun in any role she played, which was amazing to me, because Kate's been in so many roles, and is just such an iconic actress. But I think it was just right place, right time that she took on this role, which is completely unlike her in real life. And so Yeah, I mean, I again, just grateful that we got the scripts to her on that specific day where she was willing to read it and was interested. Sometimes it takes a bit of luck, I've learned.
And signs on and brings Julianne Nicholson in because they've known each other forever. But when you're writing scenes, and I think my understanding is things did shift slightly, like we talked to Evan Peters about his character, and that what's that process like when you're working, filming's going on and you're tweaking things for the specific actors? I think maybe with Gene Smart, the humor of those scenes, does that get amplified when you see the obvious chemistry between Kate and Gene? Are you tweaking things as filming's going on?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, 100%, Paul. I think a part of just my experience as a writer has been to listen, and to be a good listener. And when other people have really good ideas, to take them. And I think that's been the great lesson I've learned, is that you have to be a good listener, because Evan, I mean, some of Evan's most charming moments in the show, like "Have a good nightmare" or "Let me put my bagel down," those were Evan's ideas. I didn't write those, but I think I've always been good enough or smart enough to realize when someone has a better idea, I should just take it. And Evan had so many wonderful ideas in terms of Zabel's character that when he would mention to us, we just were like, of course, go ahead and do it. It's way better than what's written on the page. And the same can be said for all the women in the show. I think one of the great joys I had was that I had Kate and Jean and Gary and Julianne, and all of them are mothers and sisters and daughters. And so whenever there was a moment in the script where a line was registering or resonating in a way, I would have Kate or Julianne say, "Hey, I wouldn't say this as a mom. As a sister, I might approach it this way. As a daughter, I would approach it this way." And again, I think that just being able to be a good listener when someone has a better idea than you, to be able to take it and run with it is a great lesson I've learned. And I think that's part of being a writer, is to be a good listener.
So speaking of listening, so you're from that neck of the woods. I think your town, Berwyn, when I Googled it, there's a place called Easton Township about 6 miles from your town. So when you're listening to the accent, and they all worked so hard on the accent, I mean, that must have felt so good to know how dedicated these people were to your project.
So, and it paid dividends, Paul. I think, a testament to HBO that they allowed us to shoot in this town, because I don't think it was cheaper in any way. I think there were probably other solutions that they could have asked us to go elsewhere and tried to make it look like, this region, but they were 100%, with us and shooting it in this area. And the accent is really, it's very specific, Paul. And I think that if you get it right, it can start to sound a little bit on the Southern side. And so, but it really started with Kate. I remember personally having a conversation where I said, "Listen, it's such a tricky accent. It's so specific. I don't know if it's going to come off as comical. Is it something where we just don't try it and we just kind of go for some, kind of a generic accent?" And Kate was the one that said, "No, listen, if we're going to tell a story about this community, about this part of the country, then we have to get it right." And I think when Kate raises her hand and says, "I'm willing to put in the work," everyone else sort of, is going to do the same. And they all did. And they were all so wonderful. And the dialect coaches we had on the set were so incredible at going out and just getting samples that people desire. They wanted to listen to people in the community. And we had some lovely dialect coaches on the set who really worked hard. And again, I think in a story about a community, it's so important that the details are right. And some of that I could do the t-shirts and the beers and the food because I had experienced that. But the dialect is really on the actors. And so to have a group of actors who were so passionate about, just doing this place in the right way and honoring this community, I'm incredibly grateful.
So you're there filming, then COVID happens, everything has to shut down for 6 months. You come back and the restrictions on filming, you had to really revamp some of the scenes. And I think, did you not have to maybe drop some scenes and come up with others? It could talk about that pressure.
Yeah, it was, I mean, well, number one, we were, we didn't know when or how we would actually ever go back to set in the beginning, Paul, because like everyone else, there was a lot to be discovered about the pandemic and how you could go back to work safely. And that was the most important issue, of course, was how to keep a crew, how to keep them healthy and safe, because making a TV show is not worth getting people sick, of course. And so a credit to HBO that they were able to come up with a plan that really kept the crew safe. And it was incredibly detailed, and everyone. And again, I would say credit to the crew that they all honored the plan in place, because there were certain restrictions about, not going out at night or just protecting each other. And a credit to the crew that they were able to honor those, all the guidelines that were laid out. But in terms of the creative, yeah, it was really tricky, Paul, because we had a lot of scenes that we still had to shoot that had crowds in them. And
Right.
there's no way to do that. We couldn't test 100 extras and be convinced that it was safe. And so a number of those scenes, just for example, in the original scripts, when it was Siobhan and her band in the show, as it stands now, it's a radio station where they go and they meet this woman, Anne, who's the DJ. In the original scripts, that was a sorority party, and they were playing a sorority party. There's 100 people there drinking and hanging out. And in the midst of their set is when this encounter happens. But obviously you can't shoot a sorority house in a pandemic. So it took a lot of collaboration to try to, I guess the key was, how do you maintain the emotion of the scene? It was always identifying what the scene is about. What's the scene about? Is there a way to achieve that on a much smaller scale? So, it wasn't just me. It was Craig, it was Kate, it was Mark Roybal, our producer, all of us putting our heads together and trying to come up with the best solution to keep the crew safe.
Right, like the scene at the end of the wedding scene, that you make it at the tail end of the wedding, probably then rather than during the wedding. And there's something about that I think really works.
Yes.
And I think that's because we connect with those characters and the family drama aspect. So it's not surprising that everyone is clamoring for season 2. So what do you say about, you had this idea, you worked on it for 2 years, it's 7 episodes. What can you tell us?
I mean, I wish I could tell you more, Paul. I mean, look, I've always said the same answer, which is I would love to do it if we had a story that if we had a story that was a natural next step in Mare's journey. I think the trick, Paul, is what I think audiences responded to in season 1 was Mare's emotional arc. At least I hope that's what they responded to. The mystery, was the entertainment, and I think that we gave them a good enough mystery. But I hope what they left the series with was this active ascension to go and confront the thing that's been haunting her. And I feel like we threw so much, there were just emotional stuff at Mare in season 1. How could you match that emotionally in season 2? And do it justice. And so I think that, I'm acutely aware of the dangers of season 2, and in that if you can't do it right, then I wouldn't do it. But if we can do it right, and I get struck by this amazing idea, then 100% I would do it. I just haven't had that idea yet that I feel like is going to do justice to the character of Mare, the town, of these people. But if I did have that idea, I love writing those people so much, and it's where I grew up. So I would 100% want to do it.
Yeah, right. So just finally, you mentioned that you brought certain things to the show, like the beer. You knew the beers. So are you a Rolling Rock man or a Yuengling man? Because I saw there were both in there, and I think Yuengling is closer to that neck of the woods. That you had her drinking Rolling Rock.
You know what? It's funny, Paul. I grew up a Yuengling man. When we were in high school and in college, it was Yuengling, and then I married a girl whose dad was Rolling Rock. And so whenever I go home, whenever I go to Delaware County, he's got the Rolling Rock in the refrigerator. And so I've become more of a Rolling Rock guy now, but I'm not opposed to still going back to Yuengling. If I'm at a bar with my friends and they order Yuengling, I'm extremely happy to drink it.
Well, listen, when they announce the Emmy nominations next month, you could maybe raise a glass of each. When they undoubtedly, so many of them come out saying Mare of Easttown. Listen, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you.
Really into it.